Tonight on CBC Vancouver News. The impending closure of another assisted living facility and its impact on people with mental illness.
I would lose everything.
Why so many fear they'll end up homeless. Plus, strong reaction to Canada's big supermarket CEOs denying supersized profits.
I feel like they're all in cahoots.
Tonight, we hear your questions on sky-high prices. And window cleaners stuck on the side of a downtown building.
The mechanism that drives the platform up and down, that scaffolding, just stopped working.
The dramatic hour-long rescue.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Anita Bathe. The impending closure of another assisted living facility for people with mental illness in Metro Vancouver has its residents and their families frustrated and afraid. We first told you about the situation at the White Rock facility in early November. Since then, little, if anything, has been done by Fraser Health to find the 12 residents new homes. As Belle Puri reports, with less than 12 weeks to go before the facility shuts down, 9 people still have no idea where they'll go next.
The only thing certain for residents of Bona Vista Lodge is their uncertain future.
I'm doing the best I've ever done, so I'm feeling pretty confident and I'm pretty happy, except for we got to move, so.
Leaving White Rock will mean leaving favorite haunts and all that's familiar.
Oh, I would lose everything. All of those things, the privileges that I have now, it would be terrible.
The operators of the privately run assisted living facility blame a lack of funding for not renewing their contract with Fraser Health. They gave notice last June. Since then, 87-year-old Magdalena Coombs' family has been shown only one potentially new place.
It's not a home like Buena Vista. It's more institutional. My mom was there too. When she came back, all she could say is that she's going to die. She's going to die if she goes there.
Today, I'm honored to present Budget 2023.
Then last week, the provincial budget earmarked more than $1 billion for mental health supports, including operating costs. None of it is for Bona Vista.
Well, this is a home that needs that funding. Keep it open. These people need a home. They don't need addiction recovery beds, which is also needed, because they're not going to get better. This is their home. This is their life.
In an email to CBC, Fraser Health says it's working to open 10 beds in a new licensed mental health care facility in Cloverdale, which will open in the coming months. All Bona Vista residents will be offered these new beds first. These beds, it says, are as close to their existing home in White Rock as possible. The opposition says it's unjust to force vulnerable people to move.
We need to find a solution. We should have found that solution months ago. They should not have gone into the Christmas season not knowing where they were going to be. They were going to be displaced.
This was a no-brainer. We have another company that wants to take over the contract to help continue the care for these community members.
Fraser Health isn't interested in considering new operators for Bona Vista.
Unfortunately, we understand that that building is quite old, 100 years old, and the operator has decided that it no longer wishes to provide that service.
Family members are lost for answers.
Why can't they give some money towards the mental health people here? What is the problem? I don't understand.
They're not dealing with the people who have lifelong mental issues as schizophrenia and such. And this is where we're finding the problem. There's no housing for them.
In the last 4 years, including Bona Vista, Fraser Health has closed 60 mental health beds in White Rock, South Surrey. Belle Puri, CBC News, White Rock.
2 window cleaners found themselves in a pretty scary situation this afternoon when they got stuck on the side of the Deloitte building in Vancouver. The pair were on a platform halfway up the building that was not able to move up or down because of mechanical issues. Vancouver fire and rescue crews rappelled from the top of the building down to the cleaners and used ropes to lower them to safety. The building's Rubik's Cube-like walls, though, made the descent pretty difficult.
As you can see from the layout at the exterior, where it's not just a flat surface to it, so it's adding that next layer of complexity, and our hardly trained crews are able to overcome that.
Neither of the window washers were injured. Well, thousands of people in the eastern part of the Fraser Valley are without transit today until Saturday, with workers stopping service. Drivers and transit workers with QP Local 561 are calling for better pay and working conditions and a pension program from U.S.-based contractor First Transit. Talks between the union and company resume next week, but worker representatives say they are planning a complete shutdown as of March 20th, excluding essential services.
We don't need to work like long hours for 13 hours or 14 hours a day to get paid 8 hours only. So we have a life to spend with the family as well. We don't need to spend more time behind the wheel.
BC Transit says there are at least 13,000 transit rides every weekday on the affected systems, leaving commuters hoping for a quick solution. A BC Supreme Court judge has certified a class action lawsuit against a popular Vancouver private school. Darren Liptrot is one of several former students to attend Vancouver College and St. Thomas More Collegiate and is the lead plaintiff in the lawsuit, which alleges that the Christian brothers running the institutions abused their students. The decision notes that 65 potential class members have identified themselves, alleging they experienced physical or sexual abuse. CBC News has asked the Archdiocese of Vancouver, St. Thomas More Collegiate, and Vancouver College for comment, but did not hear back before broadcast. A BC-based division of the RCMP is now the subject of a federal probe. The Civilian Review and Complaints Commission responds to grievances against the Mounties, and it is now digging into a special unit known as the Community Industry Response Group. For more on this watchdog investigation, Michelle Gassoub is live with us. Michelle, the name of the unit may not ring any bells, but the cases highlighted here are familiar.
Definitely, Anita. The unit was created by RCMP's E Division in 2017, and it was meant to prepare for Indigenous and environmental activism targeting the Trans Mountain expansion and Coastal GasLink pipelines. And the unit has been deployed in several high-profile confrontations, including in 2021 when they enforced an injunction against old-growth logging blockades in the Fairy Creek area of Vancouver Island. Now, that same year, they were deployed to the unceded territory of the Wet'suwet'en people in northern BC to dismantle blockades interfering with the Coastal GasLink project. And in 2022, that enforcement ramped up, with the unit deploying as SWAT teams, crowd control squads, dogs, and helicopters. Now, word of this new investigation coincides with the proposed class action lawsuit alleging RCMP violated protesters' charter rights when they enforced the injunctions at Fairy Creek. And a lawyer for the group says the RCMP engaged in catch and release tactics like kettling and used an unjustifiably large exclusion zone policy to prevent public access to the area.
The public is permitted to go to the injunction area in order to hike, for instance, in order to document or film, in order to engage in lawful protest. And so while the exclusion zones are permitted narrowly for the purpose of conducting arrests, they're not permitted, as the claim alleges, to be used to block public access entirely.
Worth noting, Anita, the CRCC investigation will focus on both the incidents at Fairy Creek and Coastal GasLink, as well as another anti-logging demonstration that happened near Argenta, BC.
And so, Michelle, what actually happens in this sort of investigation?
Yeah, well, in an email obtained by CBC, the CRCC writes that it can examine individual member conduct for the purposes of identifying trends, gaps, or deficiencies in policy, procedure, training, supervision, planning, or leadership. Now, the watchdog will assess whether the unit's operations are consistent with the charter legislation on the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the findings of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. So far, none of these allegations have been tested in court. Anita?
Michelle Gassoub reporting live for us tonight. Thank you. Well, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police are investigating two organizations in Quebec that it suspects are working on behalf of the Chinese government. Both have served as resource centers for Chinese and Asian communities. An RCMP statement suggests the centers could be putting undue pressure on Chinese Canadians. CBC has previously reported on similar so-called Chinese police stations in Ontario and as well as here in BC. And there's more reaction tonight to yesterday's grilling of Canada's big supermarket CEOs by Ottawa lawmakers. The grocers say their profits aren't responsible for the soaring cost of food. But in the last 24 hours, CBC News has been flooded with questions about what is responsible. Peter Armstrong is looking into it.
It's easy to find Canadians upset about food prices.
They're ripping us off like they're ripping you off.
I feel like they're all in cahoots.
It's easy to find a grocery chain CEO who says it's not their fault.
The idea that grocers are causing food inflation is not only false, it's impossible.
What is hard is to untangle a complex business model and get to the bottom of what and who is driving up food prices.
We at Empire are not profiting from inflation. It doesn't matter how many times you say it, write it, or tweet it. It is simply not true.
But that's not entirely true either. There's no question that grocery chains are benefiting from inflation.
On a customer's $25 grocery basket, we earn just $1 in profit.
That $1 is a 4% margin. Consider a grocer that sells $1 million in groceries. A 4% profit margin would net them $40,000. If prices went up and they sold $2 million worth of groceries, that same 4% cut is suddenly $80,000. Profits are rising because that same percentage brings in more money. The real question, though, is whether grocery chains are taking advantage of inflation to drive up prices by more than they need to, which is complex. Loblaw's earnings are mixed in with everything else the parent company owns, and it doesn't release specific price pressures. This economist says that's just a distraction.
Canadians are paying more than just the cost of production, and these companies are making excess profits as a result.
There's one easy remedy here. The grocery chains could release more granular data and show they're simply passing along the increased costs they're facing. But they've never done that before and won't likely now. Meanwhile, they're hardly the only ones seeing record profits. Stanford says Canadian energy companies have seen their profits soar by more than 1,000% in the past 3 years alone. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
Now, as those hearings continue, there are still many unanswered questions about where $200 million announced by the BC government will be going. It's said it will be for measures like increasing local food production and helping food banks. But Lenore Newman, director of the Food and Agriculture Institute at the University of the Fraser Valley, says BC residents are struggling with high food costs, partly because of the loss of farmers.
We're seeing a farm sector in British Columbia that, to be honest, is hemorrhaging farmers because costs have gone up so much. And one thing I did want to touch on him is I think some of this money should go to looking at, well, how do we build a carbon pricing system that works for farmers instead of against them? Because the fact that farmers are paying, carbon tax when they're actually some of the few people who can sink carbon into the ground for us using the right methods. I mean, we have to be starting to empower farmers to actually have another income stream where they're sequestering carbon for us. And that's really in its infancy in Canada, but we need to get busy on that or we're not going to have any farmers left.
And you can listen to more from that interview as well as other CBC Vancouver radio programs on our CBC Listen app. That's available from your app store. Well, the Nelson Public Library has canceled a drag storytime event scheduled for this weekend after staff and storytellers were threatened and intimidated online. This was the first time the public space has tried to hold a drag story time. The library says the event was meant to model inclusiveness and a love of reading, and that they've notified police. Berkeley Vox was among those slated to appear. He says he's disappointed, but understands why the library made the choice.
As it's really important to me as a father, as a member of this community, and as somebody who was born and raised in this town, I think that kids, families, the huge queer community that exists here, everybody deserves a right to feel a part of something. Space
This
to do
isn't the first time an event like this has been canceled in BC. Last summer, a family-friendly drag show at a Victoria cafe was canceled after the cafe owner said staff were inundated with homophobic and transphobic phone calls. Well, hot on the heels of this week's provincial report into hate-related incidents, advocates in Vancouver say the justice system is failing BC's Chinese community. The report found a particular spike in anti-Asian hate, with incidents rising almost 500% in 2020. The CBC's Yasmin Gandam is speaking with those who have experienced hate firsthand.
So the garden, it's a cultural gem. It's been around for 37 years.
As Lorraine Lowe walks through the Dr. Sun Yat-sen Garden in Chinatown, she is disappointed by the vandalism and damage done to a sacred space.
It's very disheartening to see that our cultural pillars are being targeted for whatever reason.
Lowe herself has been targeted by anti-Asian hate over the past few years, being told to go back to China. She worries the historical significance of the Chinatown neighborhood is being lost.
We started a community, and now we've, survived through the resiliency of our culture, and we're still here, we're hanging on, but, we need help.
This lawyer has also been targeted, having racist slurs and verbal insults spewed at him. He says it needs to be easier for people to report hate incidents in the province.
We need to have a massive push to redefine what does it actually mean, expand the scope. The reality is it's just not working anymore. This definition's been around for over 20 years. It doesn't reflect society today in 2023, and we have to make a change now.
CBC reached out to BC government and were told there are no updates on the reporting system at this time. The report found of the 20,000 incidents that occurred from 2015 and 2021, less than a quarter were reported to police.
They're hurting. They don't care anymore. And so it's on us as citizens to make the society better for everyone else.
Joey Wong is the son of King Wong, founder of the Dollar Food Group and a respected member of the Chinese community. He says the incidents of hate have not just affected individual residents, but businesses as well.
We've been around quite a long time, from the heydays of all the bustling street to now, where it's kind of slowed down a bit. But we're hoping that we can revitalize it to the point where we can bring it back up to a middle ground level, at least, that all the businesses in China can survive that way with.
But there is some optimism in the community, with the new municipal government prioritizing the needs of Chinatown.
Things are actually moving, the needle's moving, and we've got a very supportive municipal government who's responsible for uplifting Chinatown now, and we're looking forward to seeing what's ahead.
The community hopes the stark findings bring a call to action. Yasmin Gandam, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, the former representative for children and youth in our province has had another award stripped away. The BC Civil Liberties Association has rescinded Mary Ellen Turpel-Lafont of the Reg Robson Award. The association writes that Turpel-Lafont has yet to account for the allegations about her heritage. The former judge and law professor has had several honors stripped after a CBC investigation threw her claims of Cree ancestry into question. Last month, McGill University, Carleton University, and the University of Regina rescinded her honorary degrees. More housing is coming for women and children and gender-diverse people fleeing violence.
Today, we're announcing 150 new homes in different locations throughout British Columbia. We know that these new units will help alleviate some of the pressures faced by existing housing programs and provide women and children the safe landing spots that they need in times of crisis.
The province says 3 of the new women's housing projects will be operated by nonprofit providers that specialize in housing and support for women, including transgender, two-spirit, and non-binary people who are experiencing or are at risk of violence. The new spaces will be located in Port Coquitlam, Duncan, Lower Post, and Hazelton. BC has given the green light to a new gold and silver mine near Vanderhoof. The province has approved a Mines Act permit for the Blackwater mine. Officials say the project will create 825 jobs during construction and 450 full-time jobs during its projected 22-year operation life. Artemis Gold has reached project participation agreements with 2 area First Nations on whose territory the mine sits. The first gold production is expected in the second half of 2024. If you have camping or beach plans for the upcoming spring break, you might want to take a closer look at how you're keeping the drinks cool. Popular cooler brand Yeti is recalling a number of coolers over safety concerns. The recall of the Hopper M20, Hopper M30, and Sidekick Dry models is voluntary. The problem comes from the magnet-lined closures. It turns out they can fail and result in detached magnets, which pose a risk of serious injury or death if ingested. So far, there aren't any known cases of ingestion or injuries. Anyone who owns the defective coolers are eligible for a replacement product or a full refund. For more information, customers can head to the Yeti website. Spring break and the Easter long weekend are on the way, and that means more people will be relying on BC ferries to get on and off Vancouver Island for spring travel, while the service deals with operational challenges. BC Ferries has been grappling with staffing challenges as well as mechanical and weather issues. Officials say they are working on increasing their staffing levels as we head into the spring, and they have strategies in place like cross-training employees to make sure that they can backfill positions.
Well, we do have extra sailings scheduled for the spring break period, and that's about 3 weeks because the school districts vary within the Lower Mainland as well as on Vancouver Island. So we've got extra sailings between Tsawwassen and Swartz Bay.
Currently, the ferry service is launching recruitment campaigns to date due to staff shortages that have forced sailing cancellations. BC Ferries is reporting a 52% increase in turnover among ferry employees in the last 2 years. The city of Burnaby is planning to bring year-round swimming to Central Park by covering the current outdoor pool. As part of a plan to increase access to pools, the city will be putting an enclosure around the Central Park pool. The cover will be tensioned membrane modular structure like a permanent tent. Similar ones have been used in other areas around the country, like Collingwood, Ontario's Central Aquatic Centre. Roll-up doors and translucent panels can be incorporated to improve natural light, and the structure could be ready by the end of the summer. It won't be heated inside, though. 2 municipalities in the Lower Mainland have seen so much dysfunction at the council table that they're asking the province for help. Harrison Hot Springs and Lions Bay are the latest in a long line of small towns that have big political drama. Justin McElroy reports on why it seems to happen so often.
Harrison Hot Springs. It has a resort, a surprising obsession with Bigfoot, and lately a very dysfunctional city council.
The meeting is now closed to the public? No, it isn't. You're what? You're going to call the RCMP? The meeting is closed, sir.
That was a meeting on February 21st, which was not attended by the mayor. There was another council meeting later that night with the mayor. It went worse.
Councillor Fascio, you have been asked to remove yourself from this meeting. Councillor Vidal, you have been asked to leave this meeting.
Councillors are having private meetings without the mayor, senior staff have retired or are on leave, and the new mayor struggled to run public meetings.
It's an embarrassment for the village to have 4 of our elected officials acting in this manner.
Things have gotten so bad that Harrison Hot Springs has asked the province for assistance, less than 4 months into their 4-year term. But they're not the only small town in the Lower Mainland that can't seem to run their own affairs.
Council requests the assistance of the Ministry of Municipal Affairs to provide a municipal advisor to the village of Lions Bay.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Lions Bay has also used the phone a friend option, and it also happened after an election where a new mayor was elected and most of the senior staff quit or were forced out. Now the ministry won't say how the meetings are going, and nobody from either village on council is willing to speak on the record. So it's hard to say who is in the right or wrong. But what's happening here are classic challenges with small town politics. First, a new mayor wants to change things, but that's easier said than done.
Even people who run for mayor have a misconception about how much power they potentially have.
Mayors in BC only have 1 vote, and other than chairing meetings, no real extra powers. So how do they get their agenda passed?
They only have that power of kind of persuasion as opposed to, clear direction.
And if they can't persuade? Well, in provincial or federal politics, it's set up to have a government in opposition. And if the leader of the government no longer has the votes, there are mechanisms for them to resign or to have an early election to resolve things. But in local politics, it's set up for everyone to work together collegially. And if a mayor doesn't have the votes to do things, they all just have to sit there for the rest of their term. It's part of the reason why some have called on the province to create an ethics commissioner with powers to resolve situations like this. But the province isn't interested.
Well, we certainly do, as a province, place a very high level of autonomy and responsibility on local governments. We're very reluctant to wade into matters of local government.
Which on one hand is very reasonable, but here is a chart. It shows in the last 5 years the number of Lower Mainland mayors that got into feuds with councillors that involved lawsuits, non-confidence motions, or people being removed from council. And here are the number of them that won re-election. Feuding councils may make for good drama, but it usually results in short-term employment. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
Johanna Wagstaff is away today, and so we turn to John Sauter for weather. John?
All right, we'll start this afternoon with a look at some temperatures that were happening this afternoon across British Columbia. 10 degrees in Vancouver, a nice 9 in Victoria. Of course, back to the east, we're looking at cooler temperatures, especially in the valley regions around Kelowna, Osoyoos, the Okanagan Valley, and just a -3 in Cranbrook. And then we get colder to the north, as you would expect. -10 today in Fort Nelson, -13 in Fort St. John, Dease Lake at -12 degrees. Now, what I'm watching as we get a little closer to the weekend is this rain and snow maker, a low pressure system just off the west coast of Washington. This is going to bring some rain and snow into southern British Columbia in the coming days, and I'll be back in just a few minutes to talk a little bit more about that.
Well, Canada Post's first all-electric delivery fleet is launching right here in BC. Nanaimo is getting 24 electric vehicles as the mail delivery service aims to reach net zero emissions by 2050. We got an up-close look at the new fleet.
It's really exciting that we can launch here at Nanaimo. It's one of the first depots. It's actually the first depot at Canada Post to have an entire fleet, corporate fleet, that is made up of electric vehicles. Not just about the vehicles, but it's about making sure that we have the right infrastructure to actually operate them and support them. So Nanaimo, we've selected Nanaimo as one of the first depots to receive electric vehicles is because, first of all, it's located in the beautiful province of British Columbia, where we know we have clean energy. Nanaimo as well is a facility that we have vehicles that drive less than 50 kilometers on a route. So that means that these vehicles that we have, there's sufficient range to actually do those routes maybe 2 times over. So we know that even in the coldest, harshest conditions, there's going to be enough battery range to last those routes. Yeah, so Nanaimo has 14, but there's a total of 100 that we're deploying in this first phase. So we actually created this new branding for all of our green vehicles, and we went with this color, this teal color, just to indicate that they are unique, that they are sustainable vehicles. So it's very much, it stands out. So when you see them on the street, you know that they are green vehicles. I wouldn't call it a pilot. I would say it's step 1 in our plans. If we launch these vehicles, we're launching more, the rest of the 100 in Quebec, and then we're also focusing on our long-term strategy. So we actually are looking at other sites of where we can go, again, using the same criteria. The staff have been on board, so they love the fact that we have electric vehicles. I think there's a lot of pride in the fact that they have electric vehicles and they're the first to have them.
Retired Canadian Olympians pushing for a ban on Russian athletes. Why they're saying the Canadian Olympic Committee's response is inadequate. Next. Thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream tonight. Newfoundland and Labrador is often seen as a world leader in trying to save whales tangled in ocean debris, including fishing gear and communication lines. And the province's whale disentanglement experts are now working to pass those skills on to others.
What's happening here today? We're having a whale disentanglement tool workshop with people from across Canada, input from worldwide on different tools that are used for disentangling whales. We are taking the tools that people brought and using and testing them for their cutting strength on different types of ropes. This is our first time doing this. So what we're doing is looking at the gear that we already use and some prototypes that have never been used in the water and finding ways to cut gear off the whale easier, maybe at a long distance easier, maybe if they're embedded ropes easier. It's just to make it a safer process for the disentangler and a quick process for disentangling the whale.
The Whale Research Group has tried rescuing whales from the ice, from fishing nets, up to 150 whales in years while the cod fishery was active.
This was a problem where a whale was in someone's cod trap, and someone got in touch with John at the university, and because he had been doing some things with whales, and they asked him if he would come and try to disentangle this whale. And so he went, and they worked a long time to try to get the whale out, in fact, several weeks, and then they finally were able to do it. And they found that their best methods was to get close, and their best tools were filleting knives at the time.
We started the Campobello Whale Rescue Team in 2002.
And how much were you inspired by what was happening here with the Whale Rescue Group here in Newfoundland?
A lot. They were the first ones that started. They started this, so yeah, we learned a lot from them over the years, and it's always good to have the networking and talk with other people, just to see if they've seen problems, because everyone's different. Every whale entanglement's different, so it's nice to be able to ask people questions and pick on their experience. All of us getting together and sharing ideas and things like that. It's great to watch the performance of the tools in the flume tank here underwater to see how they work. And yeah, we've got a lot of good ideas, and it's great that we're a group, because someone comes up with an idea and then someone else will add a little bit something to it. So yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of good things come out of this workshop, and hopefully it's something that'll continue on, every year, every couple of years, to keep improving.
Retired Canadian Olympians are pushing for a competition ban on Russian and Belarusian athletes. For Ukrainian athletes, there's no room for ambiguity, and they maintain the stance of Canadian Olympic officials falls flat and falls short. Ellen Morrow brings us the reaction.
Ukrainian Olympian Vladislav Hrskevich has fiercely protested the invasion of his country.
The situation is the same as it was a year ago. The same war, like a lot of people being killed by Russian occupiers.
Now he's outraged that Canada's Olympic Committee is open to a path for Russians to participate in the 2024 Games.
So you just put yourself on our place.
Dozens of former Canadian Olympians have signed a letter, first reported on The National, demanding the COC take a stronger stance against the possibility of Russian athletes competing under a neutral banner at the Paris Olympics.
You have to have moral courage, and you have to do what's right, and that's what we're doing. That's what we're asking our governing body to do.
The COC is downplaying the dispute, asserting in response, we support the exclusion of Russian and Belarusian athletes while the invasion is ongoing. But the COC is also leaving room for Russian participation under a workable neutrality model.
The government's position is clear.
Canada's sport minister says neutrality is impossible.
The models that were proposed previously by the IOC in regards to neutrality, whether it was because of drug use by Russian athletes, has never worked. So we don't see how they can have a better proposal.
The International Olympic Committee initially said Russian athletes should be banned. Then it backtracked, signaling openness to a so-called pathway for their participation. Critics say it's part of a pattern, the IOC kowtowing to Moscow.
As far as the IOC concerns, they just want to expand their reach as far as possible, seemingly unconcerned about the broader consequences of the Olympic Games in geopolitics and the ways that the Olympics are used as a tool of these authoritarian regimes.
Other national Olympic committees have pushed back against the IOC.
Of course, it's a big disaster.
Hrskevich wants Canada's to do the same.
listen to your athletes, listen to their voices, and make right decisions.
That's Ellen Morrow reporting tonight. The Canadian women's soccer team took their demand for equal pay right to Parliament Hill today. As Thomas Douglas shows us, Canada Soccer seems to have noticed.
Accustomed to doing battle on the field, the players were called to Ottawa to discuss a different kind of fight.
Our most painstaking battle has been with our own federation.
Led by Captain Christine Sinclair, 4 members of the Olympic gold medal winning women's soccer team laid out for a Commons committee what they consider unfair treatment from the Sports Federation.
The disparity between the treatment of the men's and women's national teams is glaring, and it shows that Canada Soccer views the women's program to be of secondary importance to the men's program.
Wearing purple on the pitch to demand equity, players are also asking Canada Soccer to open its books and explain how the federation makes and spends money. During contract talks last year, Sinclair says then-President Nick Bontis used sexist language to trivialize their demands.
The president of Canada Soccer listened to what I had to say, and then later in the meeting referred back to it as, quote, "What was it Christine was bitching about?"
Just before the hearing, the Federation laid out in public its offer to the women and men, saying the proposed collective bargaining agreements will pay both national teams the same amount for playing a 90-minute match.
We feel quite disrespected. There were terms and numbers and pieces of what was in their statement today that has not even been communicated to us.
See the young fan in the red jersey shaking her head in disbelief? The players say they're doing this for girls like her, making the sport more fair for generations to come.
Canada Soccer executives are being called to testify later this month. And not only that, the players are saying it may be time for a public inquiry to examine the culture across several sports. Thomas Douglas, CBC News, Toronto.
Now to a first for Canada. Toronto's school board has voted to acknowledge that oppression exists in its system that is rooted in India's history. Lisa Shing shows us some are welcoming this in the South Asian community, others are not.
And that has passed 16-5.
A motion passed and a victory for many in Toronto's South Asian community.
I think we made history. I'm so honored.
The trustee sponsored a motion to have Canada's largest school board recognize caste oppression exists in schools and to work with the province's Human Rights Commission on how to deal with incidents.
It's happening from students to students. It's happening from teacher to students and teacher to teacher.
The caste system is an ancient form of social hierarchy in India that spread to the diaspora. Historically, dominant castes have enjoyed greater rights. Oppressed castes, like Dalits, deal with social ostracization, even violence. Raja Kulasingham says she has heard from hundreds of families about harassment and bullying based on caste.
They've come here as immigrants.
Mira Solanki Estrada says she's faced that all her life.
She's like, I wouldn't want a stupid kid, and my eyes filled with tears.
She says the motion will protect her 2 children.
So many of us Dalits have been fearful to speak out of who we are. I didn't say who I was until I was 40 years old.
In February, Seattle became the first U.S. city to ban discrimination based on caste. It's now a protected class alongside race, religion, and gender identity. Despite these developments, there has been vocal opposition.
That singles out the South Asian community. Where is the data? More rigorous analysis needs to be done.
But some say it's time to call out what's happening in the community. South Asians make up about 1/5 of all students in Toronto's public board.
Who should tell that caste doesn't exist? It is the victims of the caste system who should tell whether they are being treated fair and equal or not.
With this motion, some hope more stories will emerge. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
Russia has unleashed a brutal series of strikes in Ukraine, firing dozens of missiles, including a powerful hypersonic weapon that moves at 5 times the speed of sound. How the assault offers insight into Russia's long-term strategy next.
400 kilometers of trunk sewer lines, 33 pump stations and wastewater treatment plants make up the sewage system in Greater Vancouver. Much of it is over 60 years old. It's been poorly maintained, especially in the last 10 years, and now the piper must be paid.
And so our main concern now is that before we move into our next major expansion program, which we're looking at in the starting the next year, that we put what we have in good order before we move into that what is a 7-year billion-dollar expansion program.
Every major part of the system needs upgrading. It will take money and manpower. This is the Iona Island wastewater treatment plant. It serves Vancouver, and there are 4 others taking care of the rest of the GVRD. The turbines that run this plant were built in 1948. They've been running almost non-stop since that time, and they need to be replaced.
There's a lot of metal fatigue on them. They've got hundreds of thousands of hours. They're a real high-cost maintenance item. We should be looking at the replacement of these engines within the next 5 or 6 years, or sooner if possible.
Tenney says other parts of the plant must also be overhauled soon.
The screens on this are 29 years old. The average life of any mechanical equipment is usually expected to last 20 years. So
there's 9 years over it.
That's right.
The GVRD will add an additional 60 workers to the entire system over the next few months. Representative Mayor Beth Johnson of Delta, who speaks for the politicians, says it's money well spent.
The old story is, you've got to take care of what you already have. Otherwise, you end up spending a lot more money in the future. I think that we're doing a lot of catch-up right now, and it's going to cost a lot of money, but I think it's critical for the whole system in order for it to work for those 50 or 100 years into the future that we're hoping that it'll last.
Flusher crews are also hoping for improvements in the system. When gravel builds up in a line now, a worker has to physically go down and clear it. This is dangerous, and it takes time.
It's very time-consuming, but it's all we've got right now. We're hoping to convince people that we need a combination truck with a vacuum truck, which eliminates the guys going down, which is a big safety thing, and it also cuts down on time to get the gravel out of the sewer.
Sewage spills were rare a few years ago, but there were 70 incidents of major backups and flooding since November of 1988. The demand on the system will continue to grow as long as the population goes up. Bob Gillingham, CBC News, Vancouver.
A date has been set for U.S. President Joe Biden's visit to Canada later this month. Biden and First Lady Jill Biden will travel to Ottawa on March 23rd and 24th. The U.S. president will address Parliament, and he'll meet with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to discuss defense cooperation and modernizing the North American Aerospace Defense Command. Well, Russian missiles hit across Ukraine overnight, and the barrage included some of Russia's top weapons. The CBC's Lindsay Duncombe has more on the damage.
The largest wave of Russian missile strikes on Ukraine so far this year hit while people slept. A family killed in this village in western Ukraine, buried in rubble. We were hoping that they're alive, she says, but they're not alive. A swarm of missiles, 81 in total, and several drones hit 10 regions across the country. Ukraine says it intercepted close to half of them. In Kherson, local authorities say 2 people died when artillery hit this public transit stop. Another woman killed by shrapnel. Russia's main targets, though, infrastructure and electricity. The attacks initially left 40% of the capital in the dark.
I'm fed up with it. Can't stand all this. I don't have the strength anymore. Why are they doing this?
That exhaustion of the Ukrainian public, the military, and Western allies may be exactly what Russia is trying to provoke, according to this military analyst.
I think Russia has prepared for a very long war, and Russia understands that Western countries are not going to back down.
Ukraine counted 6 hypersonic cruise missiles, which it can't intercept, believed to be the largest number fired by Russia in the war to date. In southern Ukraine, the Russian-controlled Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the largest in Europe, lost power for the 6th time, prompting this plea from the UN's nuclear watchdog.
Each time we are rolling a dice. And if we allow this to continue time after time, then one day our luck will run out.
He urged the parties to agree to a protection zone around the plant. But in this bleak aftermath, there is no sign the sides are closer to an agreement on that or peace. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, London.
At 6:44, a live look from the Swans Hotel in Victoria tonight. Spring may be around the corner, but the soggy forecast is returning as we inch closer to the weekend. We've got your full forecast coming up.
Today, CJ, Jackie, and Heather are working on a sparkly new research project.
So, as you guys know, it's really hard to tell the bears' poop apart. So, we're using glitter here. We feed it to the bears and the meat, and it just passes through them and it comes out the other end. So, every bear has a different color.
Definitely purple for Aurora, because she's our prettiest bear. Oh. Yeah. And in my opinion, purple's the prettiest color.
Okay.
We work with the research and conservation team here at Assiniboine pretty much daily.
We wouldn't be able to do this type of research without their help, and so it's a really important link for us to have.
So tell us more about this study for this glitter poop.
So people and animals, when they have a bowel movement, they're actually passing hormones through their system as well.
Yeah.
And hormones like progesterone tell us a little bit more about where they're at in terms of kind of their fertility cycles and if they're able to breed or how mature they are in terms of reproductive status. There's a lot we just don't know about polar bears in the wild, especially how they breed and kind of when they mature. So here we have the benefit where we have animals in our care and we can follow them over an amount of time. We can learn a lot from a polar bear's poop, like is it ready to have a cub? Is it feeling stressed? What kind of things it's been eating? So a lot of what we learn here is hopefully going to be applied by people who are working with them directly in the wild. I think we got all the meat done, all their colors. Can't wait to see what comes out the other end.
Leave us with the fun part.
Yeah.
Okay.
After a breakfast of glitter meatballs,
Okay, I'm done.
all 9 rescued bears are brought inside so Heather and Jackie can safely enter the enclosure for a unique treasure hunt.
So this is Sparkles in feces. Polar bear poop.
The glitter poop samples provide a treasure trove of information.
We have, right now, 9 different polar bears, and they're all so different from each other. And so it really gives you kind of a broad look at a species as a whole.
We have this controlled environment that we can do different research projects on to learn more about them to help their wild counterparts.
So this one here is Storms, I just collected. I know it's his because Storms has green sparkles.
So I found an Aurora.
Excellent.
I'm gonna grab hers. I didn't get any poo on myself today.
That requires a high five. A poo-free day.
Last month's train derailment in Ohio has put the safety of transporting hazardous materials in the spotlight. Brian Labby looks at how the issue is approached in one major Canadian city.
A CP freight train rumbles into downtown Calgary. Dangerous goods move through the city every day. Crude oil, gasoline, sodium hydroxide, and ammonia are some of the hazardous shipments.
We do have a collaborative relationship with the railways to make sure that we do have an understanding of what is being transported.
It's how they draw up their training and emergency plans in the event of a derailment and leak. This derailment 10 years ago forced the evacuation of 150 homes and businesses in Inglewood. Following the disaster in Lac-Mégantic in 2013, the major railway companies are required to tell municipalities the top 10 dangerous goods that move through communities. For both CN and CP, liquefied petroleum gases and diesel fuel are the most common dangerous goods.
I get calls from the fire department and the CP rail on, I would say a monthly basis when a train skips the track.
Kara describes disasters like the one in Ohio last month and Quebec a decade ago as horrendous. He calls them high-impact, low-frequency events.
It's very rare that these things happen. And what you can do is you can say, well, in the event that something bad's going to happen, let's not put anything anywhere near anything.
Kara says that would be wrong. He says the city has taken what he calls a thoughtful approach as more buildings sprout up next to the tracks.
I think it's great as long as we are appropriately careful. And I am confident that everything that gets approved along the tracks is having the appropriate risk assessment done to it and is being designed in a way to minimize the impact in the event of a tragedy, and is also being designed in a way that we can get in and fix it as soon as possible.
He says proper planning and emergency preparedness will help keep people safe in the event of a rail disaster. Brian Labby, CBC News, Calgary.
Joanna Wagstaff is away today. John Sauter is in. And John, we've had some nice sun, but that's about to end, isn't it?
It's a bit of a soggy forecast as we get closer to the weekend, thanks to this low pressure system, which will start to move on shore tonight into Friday morning, bringing lots of rain and snow south of the border, but some of that through southern BC as well. Now, with this windy conditions, some of the highways to the east of Vancouver will be dealing with not just snow, but some wind, and right through the day on Friday and into Saturday. And then as we do get into the weekend, what will be showers in Vancouver on Friday will change to more of periods of steady rain as we head into the weekend. Some snow in higher elevations and some rain in coastal regions in the lower mainland, and right through into Sunday morning as well. A couple of weather alerts, dust advisories in effect for the Vernon area and Golden, and some of the rain and snow may bring an end to those advisories as we head through the weekend. Snowfall amounts over the next 48 hours. Not too impressive, really. We're looking at moderate snowfall here. 5 centimeters Abbotsford, 5 in Kelowna, more like 9, or 7, that is, in Fernie, and 9 in Grand Forks. And as for rainfall, we will see some accumulating rain here over the next 48 hours. It really intensifies on Saturday, but I do think there will be periods when you can get outside and do some bike riding, hiking, that sort of thing. So tonight's forecast includes showers for Vancouver, Victoria, Lytton, and Soyuz. A little bit drier back to the east for tonight anyway. And then as we head to the north, pretty dry conditions, but cold. Minus 17 with some snow in Fort Nelson. We'll see a little bit more snow tomorrow, but high pressure over the northern part of the province, keeping conditions pretty dry over the next 48 hours. Some more showers changing to rain across the southern part of the province, but out into Cranbrook, it is all snow with a daytime high of -3. Now, 7-day forecast for Vancouver looking pretty consistent. Lots of rain here, very consistent overnight temperatures, and very consistent daytime temperatures for the next 7 days.
Coming up, a rink that's got to be seen to be believed. Stick with us.
Pulling into Gateway in Cole Harbour, it's become almost a bigger local legend than Sidney Crosby. Always a busy parking lot, a lineup to shop. People say it's worth the effort. Courtney LeBlanc feeds her family of 6 at a price she can still afford.
I bet you we save between $500 to $700 a month by coming to Gateway. We come once a week. We spend about $150. That gives us our meals for the week, and it's a lot cheaper than going to Walmart, Sobeys, anywhere that competes with them.
Everyone here singing from the same choir book. Janet Pye and her husband are stocking up.
Well, this is a place to come.
Look at the price, $3.10. You know, we'll get 2 meals out of that.
Working on the cash, Tamara Seelig. She co-owns Gateway with her husband. When they bought it 15 years ago, it was tiny, and they slowly expanded, mindful of not becoming too big.
Because we buy in bulk and we sell volume, we're able to keep that margin really low and just pass the savings right on to the customers.
And it's Nova Scotia meat and chicken and fish.
Our eggs come from the valley, the chicken comes from the valley, the beef comes from Nova Scotia and PEI mostly.
So let's do a little experiment. I'm shopping at Gateway, then I'll head to Sobeys and Atlantic Superstore with the same grocery list. Here's the list. From eggs to blueberries that I noticed were on special, and other fruits and vegetables, and lean ground beef and chicken breasts. I go around the loop at Gateway, and then the checkout.
$59.36.
It's already less than what I expected, but how does it compare to the big guns? I head across the street to Sobeys and start filling up my cart with my list.
Next up, Superstore.
Same list, slight difference in weight for chicken and beef, but I buy as close as I can at all 3 stores. Here's the final tally. Gateway came in at $59.36, Sobeys $77.88, and Atlantic Superstore $84.10. That means Gateway was nearly 24% cheaper than Sobeys and nearly 30% cheaper than Superstore. I invite Dr. Sylvain Charlebois, known as the food professor, in to find out why. His research specialty is food security, safety, and supply chains.
Your experiment is busting a very important myth. Big is not always cheaper. And a store like Gateway is simplistic. It's very small, but there's some really good deals all the time there.
With StatsCan today saying food inflation continues to rise, let's take a look at those inflationary numbers. Baked goods up almost 15%. Vegetables close to 14% higher. Dairy products went up. So did fruit, fish, and meat too. Some of it's supply chain, some of it's the war in Ukraine affecting global wheat prices, and then there's eggs. So my grocery experiment, as food prices still rise, shopping around costs you time, but can save you a lot of cash. Colleen Jones, CBC News, Cole Harbour.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
On March 30th, join Angela Starrett at the Alumni UBC webinar on Indigenous youth, nurturing the next generation. Hear from 3 Indigenous speakers who mentor Indigenous youth to share knowledge in their communities and beyond. Register at alumni.ubc.ca and never miss an episode of your favorite CBC drama or comedy with the free CBC Gem app. Check it out at gem.cbc.ca.
Well, if you've ever wondered how a young hockey player makes it to the NHL, this is how it starts. A talented kid, a devoted parent, and a cause that is greater than the love of the game.
Ready, bro? Incoming!
This is how Dakota Kuntz takes practice shots on his son trip. They live at Buffalo Pound Lake, north of Moose Jaw, and built an outdoor rink in their front yard. And this is just one way Dakota gets down to it.
My son absolutely loves hockey, and we just wanted to make it closer to home, so we decided to have a rink on the lake because it's just so close.
11-year-old Tripp is an avid goalie, and he likes to make his entrance this way. He spends hours on their homemade rink, after school, and on the weekend.
Me and my dad decided to make a rink for, so people can come out and have fun. Because there's not a rink out here, and it's quite far to Moose Jaw. And there's lots of people that like hockey out here, and it's Saskatchewan and Canada, favorite sport.
The father and son have built a rink every winter for several years, and each time it gets more elaborate. They even made a small Zamboni from a rain barrel.
Favorite part about this rink is the GT track that leads down to it. the ice trail that leads down to it that has a fire pit for warming up. The mini stick rink is phenomenal. I'll be building that every year. It's so much fun. The ice shack to warm up in and to fish from is super fun.
Tripp loves when people fire pucks at him from up above.
They bounce a lot, so they get pretty hyped if they score one, but they almost never do.
Getting out on the ice is helping the family through a tough time. Dakota's mother recently passed away from a brain injury.
I'm really going to push to build an outdoor rink for the community so it's up in the trees and sheltered from the weather. And I want to name it after my mom that just passed away, and also call it the Rink of Dreams, because that is where dreams are made.
Dreams and memories of hours together on the rink they built. Louise Beagle, CBC News, Buffalo Pound.
Oof, a lot of jealousy going on in this newsroom over that playground. That is incredible. Probably every kid's dream, maybe every adult's dream as well. Not quite feasible in the Lower Mainland, but other parts of BC, I think you can make it happen. Thanks for watching CBC Vancouver News tonight. Dan Burrett will be here tomorrow. Hope you have a great evening.